The United States will withdraw troops from Germany and add more troops to its positions in Poland. The place troops are, though, may not be as important as how they move. Barry Blechman is co-founder and distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center. Barry, thanks very much for coming on the program. What did you find when you looked at the locations of troops versus the speed to deployment for troops around the world?
We found that permanent deployments of troops made very little difference when we're trying to coerce another country, when we want to deter an attack or get someone to do something we want them to do. What matters is the changes in our deployments. When we're moving an aircraft carrier or ground forces into a region that's troubled, that gets people's attention. The troops that are there already are kind of part of the wallpaper, you know? They're accepted. Oh yeah, the United States has 10,000 troops in Germany or whatever it is. But if the United States adds a brigade combat team, for example, into Germany when the Russians were making some threats to Eastern Europe, that would make a difference. Or if we move them into Poland, for example.
You and your colleague James Siebens, former colleague Melanie Sisson, and you writing in Breaking Defense, Stimson Center recently completed an analysis of more than 100 events since the end of the Cold War. So this is a data-based analysis and not just an observational-based analysis. Am I on the right track, Barry?
Yes, you're right. We did a very exhaustive search of all the incidents involving U.S. Armed Forces since the end of the Cold War. And we found more than 100 times when the U.S. was trying to coerce another country, when we were trying to get a decision maker to do something or not to do something. And but we didn't want to go to war with them. We wanted to persuade them by demonstrating our resolve. Hey, we're serious about this. We don't want you to move into Ukraine or whatever the situation was. And we found, surprisingly, even in the early days when we were supreme militarily, our success record wasn't that great. Something like 50% of the times we were successful. And the times we were most successful was when we backed up our words with the movement of forces. Sometimes we would move an amphibious group, Marine group through into the region. That was very effective, or an aircraft carrier. Or when we put troops on the ground and they conducted exercises with an allied nation and then took them out again. They don't have to live there with their families and so forth. They have to just go in, show our capabilities, familiarize themselves with the terrain, work with the ally, and then come back home. So, and that gets people's attention. They say, look, the U.S. is serious. They're willing to put more lives at risk to achieve their aims here.
Barry, you and your colleagues write in Breaking Defense, during a crisis, moving new forces into the region does significantly increase the chance that an adversary will back down, but the number of troops, aircraft, and ships already in the region prior to a crisis had no impact on the outcome. Is it the case, did you find that it was the case, though, that having a presence in an area helps the military move resources in an organization faster, or is it the actual movement of itself, regardless of where they started out, that does the trick?
Well, having troops there has some advantages. It familiarizes them with the terrain and they can build facilities. But we believe we'd be better off spending money to improve the logistical hubs, the airfields, the railroads, the ports, rather than spending the money to keep troops and typically their families in the region on a permanent basis. That's very expensive, you know, because American troops typically in Europe particularly, or in Korea, Japan, they live with their families. And that means schools, it means PXs, the whole infrastructure that goes like a base in the United States. So it's expensive to keep. And we'd be better off spending that money, moving them in, just the troops themselves, conducting an exercise. They gain the same familiarity with the region. They gain the same knowledge of the ally they'll be fighting with, and then they could come home and live their lives at Fort Hood or wherever they might be based.
We just have a couple of minutes left, Barry. Is that infrastructure to make that movement possible or make it work better the biggest gap, do you think, between what we have now and what we would need to realize the vision that you and your colleagues lay out?
Yes, yes, it is. We've let it deteriorate since the Cold War ended. At one time we had 500,000 troops in Europe, and then it came down to 300,000 and then 50,000 or so. But along with taking the troops out, we let the facilities deteriorate. And the Allies, the Germans, have not been spending the money to keep them up either. And the countries in Eastern Europe, the ones which are most threatened, the Baltic states and Poland, they could well invest in facilities so that we could get there quicker. We've found some constraints when we try to move aircraft fighter squadrons in, for example. There wasn't the support facilities at the airfields there. They're not used to the kinds of things that the U.S. forces need.
Barry Blechman, thanks very much for coming on. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.